Jason Hanasik, you are an award-winning filmmaker, artist, and journalist. Your work has been exhibited at the Smithsonian's National Portrait Gallery, screened at various international film festivals, presented on stage at the Brooklyn Academy of Music and Ace Theater in LA, and featured on the BBC. Your photography monograph, I Slowly Watched Him Disappear, is in the research collections of the Metropolitan Museum of Art, MoMA NYC, and the New York Public Library's Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture in Harlem. You have a Master of Journalism from UC Berkeley, a Master of Fine Arts from California College of Arts, and have taught at both schools. Welcome, Jason Hanasik.
Thanks for having me.
We're so glad you made it.
Yeah.
Yeah, how's your 2021 post pandemic life been treating you?
Oh, it is. It's been good. I've got some travels in and lots of hugs.
That's probably the best thing I think anyone's going to ask for right now. That's amazing. Well, we discovered you because you made the amazing film Childhood on Fire, and I had serendipitously got to meet the subject of that film, and we've also had him on here. And Nick Herndon, I'm sorry I didn't mention his name. And Nick said, guys, my story's great. We were, Daniel and I were enthralled by his parenting and his story of with his sons. And that's such a great episode that I think about often as a parent, as a dad. And he goes, Nick goes, what you should really do is reach out to Jason. And I remember like hearing him, I'm like, I don't know what could be cooler than talking to you, Nick. And then we finally, looked you up. I was like, oh, okay, I see what Nick's talking about. So you're an incredible filmmaker, and your subjects, the word that you use to describe the subjects of your films is resilience.
Yeah.
How do you find resilience in your life right now? Like what are you have been resilient through in the last, especially a couple of years through all this?
Oh, that's a good question. Really leaning into chosen family has provided a ton of resilience through both the pandemic and also just navigating the ups and downs of daily life.
Yeah.
And that does include some members of my biological family, but for the most part, it's made up of people whom I've chosen as an adult, and they've chosen me, that, we're going to operate as family members.
Yeah. Is everybody local to you for that kind of thing?
Most of them are not, which is kind of, which has become, sad in many ways. Like at certain points in our lives, we lived in the same city or, whatnot, but no, everyone's kind of scattered at this point.
Yeah. My wife and I use the phrase doing life together to describe those individuals. I've never used that. I like that word that phrase chosen family a lot. We've got lots of those folks. I don't want to say lots. We have our group, our few that we do that. Daniel's definitely one of those guys for me. He's become kind of my adopted brother. I don't even know what's more than a brother, something. Uncle brother, something, I don't know.
Father, am I your father, Ron?
You're not my dad.
I'm yourself.
I mean, that's actually kind of one of my favorite parts about the chosen family. Not that I enjoy the fighting, but to step back when there's been a kind of like a tryst and go, oh God, they really are my brother. Like we are fighting like we are siblings. And then I recognize the fullness of the relationship, and I'm like, oh, that's wonderful, actually.
Yeah, that's so good. Daniel, I got a good row a couple of weeks ago. It was nice.
It was
cathartic. It was like afterwards, we were both like, that was great.
Well, it was such a long time coming, like we've never had, Ronald's never said an angry word at me or hadn't ever, like, and I could kind of feel like, hey man, we're going to be working together and we're talking every day. Like this is going to, and I'm like, I have my own intensities and, and so I was like, it kind of needs to happen. So we just know we're going to be cool and that it can happen. And it was awesome. It was one of the more mature, no, it was like the most mature conflict I think I've ever been in. And it was cool. It was like we were both kind of like not wanting to say something hurtful, you know, um and yet both hurt and upset, you know, but hurt in different ways. And I remember Ronald was just like, I'm gonna take a minute here. And he just like got really quiet, looked down, did some breathing. And I was thankfully in a place where I wasn't like pushing him. And he came back like maybe 30 seconds later, and he wasn't suppressing shit. He was just like, I want to make a choice from not that place. And within 10 or 15 minutes, we talked through this issue. And then we did a podcast later that day. And then by that night, I was like, man, I love you. I'm so impressed with what you just did in that. And it made me a more mature person and act more maturely. It was an awesome experience.
I mean, isn't that like amazing that you get to model, you know, just like what you just described, you get to see a model and to model good behavior that I don't know about you, but I wish had have been modeled for me for conflict resolution. And also on the other side, like the fullness of what love can be, not just tied to expectations or, you know, money or other types of things that really in a lot of biological families get really kind of fucked up when you're growing up, that you learn these patterns of behaviors that just become unconscious. And
100%. Yes.
I feel
I
like
don't know, maybe Ronald had a completely different experience. I
mean, part of it was realizing I was like redlining pretty good. And when I'm redlining, I've finally, you know, 41, and I finally figured out like what's the physiological experiences I'm having. So my vision narrows, my face gets hot, I feel like, you know, certain pressure in my nervous system, certain areas. And I wish I was one of those cool guys like in the movies who has the exact right thing to say when they're, you know, they're angry or they need to get a point across, and I'm not. I like lose my ability to speak. And all I really wanted to say was something like "go fuck yourself," something in that vein. And I was like, this isn't gonna fix the thing, so I need to like actually like time out myself and think of something. I don't remember what I said, but I do remember the feeling afterwards.
No, you still said "go fuck yourself," but it was like really kind.
And that's the kind of dad I'm so glad I am.
I really appreciated it.
It was like, go fuck yourself with a hug at the same time. It sounds like.
Just a little ruffle of the hair. That's funny. So what was your, you know, Jason, you grew up East Coast, military culture around you, I'm going to guess pretty conservative. And in your family as well. Is your family conservative?
Actually, Ron?
Yeah, dude.
Sorry, before we move on, and I hope this is okay, but Jason, I was just curious if you experienced much around that like, because we were talking about emotional intelligence last time, and particularly in men. That's a subject really dear to my heart, and I know Ronald too.
Yeah, big time.
How do you do in conflict these days? Do you feel like you have the ability to self-regulate and make different choices? Do you lose it? Do you mind talking a little bit around that?
Sure, I'm all over that continuum. I mean, I'm there. Everything that Ron just described around vision narrowing, nervous system getting activated, like all those things, I definitely feel that. And there are moments when I'm aware of that, and I can take a breath and take myself out of the situation and be like, I need to not have this conversation right now. Like, let's circle back at another time. And then there are other moments where I'm so in it that I can't self-regulate. And of course, afterwards, I beat myself up about the situation. And then I'm like, I'm a human and I'm doing my best. And I, come back. And there are, there's moments that I'm deeply embarrassed by about how I responded to individuals.
Yeah, feel that.
And also there are moments where other individuals have done that to me, and I am able to provide a sense of grace to myself, and in many ways to the relationship. I don't want to say to them, I don't want to say to the relationship between the two of us, and just de-escalate the situation, because I know what it's like to have been in that same position, that they've been triggered, because I know what it feels like when I've been triggered, and I can't get out of it. I can't get out of the loop, that I go into.
Yeah, it's so powerful, right? When I've noticed in becoming a little bit more aware of my emotions, that it's really easy to say like, oh, I'm going to make different choice when I get to that place. I know what that place feels like. I'm aware of it. I'll make a different choice. But it's like, it's not a me that can make that choice that's experiencing it. By the time I get there, it's like, I'm not that person who can make that choice anymore. And yeah, I can, and the gap can close, but
yeah, but also like how that rush of chemicals, that rush of hormones
I
going
think
through
that's
our
what I mean.
body
Exactly.
is set up to protect us, to help us survive. I mean, we're working against a lot of evolution.
Yeah, that's a great way to describe it. Yeah.
And so I come back to just like giving myself a sense of grace. Like, I'm an animal sometimes, and I feel threatened, and it may be outsized, and it's building upon 39 years of experiences, which have taught me a series of things, which caused that little lever to go off and those chemicals to rush down my body. And maybe by the time I die, I'll get to some enlightened place where I can interrupt that lever every single time, but maybe not. Maybe I'm going to die, really, really flawed on that area. And that's okay. Like, I'm doing my best.
Yeah, it's interesting you called it flawed, but then also said it's okay. Because I don't even know if it's a flawed response, right?
It's a survival response.
Yeah. I've heard it said that men deal with three major things, like the universal things that men deal with, or kind of break down to anger, pride, and some kind of like struggle with their sexuality, like their inability or ability to like say what they want, or would you say that that's true in your experience and just your own life, and then just kind of viewing where you grew up in your community and your circle of friends?
Anger, pride, and then basically
Just sex,
pleasure?
just like sex,
like pleasure.
Yeah, I think there's a bunch of subcategories of sex.
Like it could be shame or something.
Could be shame, right. Yeah.
Well, I'd have to give a lot more time to think about whether or not I would organize it just under those three like columns.
Yeah.
But yeah, those are like, I mean, you touch one of those in any of the, in a variety of individuals that have, that I've crossed paths with, and it's going to be a throwdown, and that could be a verbal throwdown, that could be a physical throwdown, that could be a throwdown in the bed, like if we're going to talk about pleasure, like, it's going to be, we're going to go to the mat on that one.
I've never heard that one, Ron. Have you? Where did you hear that? Or
that's a good question. Now I'm a little embarrassed to tell you where I heard it. I heard it probably in church, like in some kind of churchy scenario a long time ago. And I've and in my experience within the church community, that seemed to be relatively true.
Yeah.
And now I'm just testing it out as I'm like I've been outside that world for a while now, but I'm just kind of like, is this true also here? And it's not something I completely subscribe to, but I'm curious about it.
Yeah, I'm trying to fill in the last one for me, like not for me, but like how that would all round out. And I would think anger is definitely one for men, the masculine in the world for sure, right?
Yeah.
And then if pride were connected to shame, then I would say that's a good one too. That covers a lot of ground, at least for me personally, and I would think in the world. And the last one, when you say it having around sex or women, I would say like maybe possessiveness, around women, or something around that relationship with feminine, with mother, with sexuality. I'm with you, man. That covers like pretty much the like major issues that and anger having to do with hurt, assuming allegedly, that's an interesting way to look at things.
Yeah. I don't, I mean, I know I didn't think I was an angry person until
till I hit you that one day in sparring, because it all came up.
Then it all just like, that's hilarious. I don't remember that. You'll have to make fun of me around that sometime. No, it was right after I got a divorce. I was married before. I married my Christian brainwashing camp sweetheart. We met when I was
Like the descriptor. Wow.
She was a lovely girl. Like, she's a good human being. But we met when we were like 17 at this like summer camp that was like, Bill Clinton is the Antichrist. This is 1997. Bill Clinton is the Antichrist. Red China is going to take over America, and the gay agenda will destroy the world. And
Woo!
yeah. And it was like they're really actively trying to brainwash us academically to like go that.
Yeah.
Afterwards, we got out of it. Both of us were like, "Whoa, what was that?" But we got married. For a bunch of reasons, we got a divorce, and I was divorced by the time I was 25-ish. And right after that divorce, no, it was later. I was 26, 27. I was living in England working for her dad for a venture capital company that was trying to buy a British car brand. And I ended up working for that car brand, and the venture fell apart, but the company ended up hiring me. And I had just gotten like my divorce papers FedEx to me from California to where I was living in England. I was having a rough time, like experiencing anxiety attacks and drinking till I was blacking out a couple times a week, almost nightly at that time. And I remember walking down the street in this little town I lived in. It was a town called Stratford upon Avon.
Oh yeah.
And where old Bill Shakespeare's from.
Oh.
And I saw this boy who was like 12 or 13 on his bike with his gang of friends on their bikes. And these were just like normal 12 or 13-year-olds. Like, there was nothing nefarious about these kids. But a mother was like trying to get her stroller around these kids. And she, shouldn't have done this, but she was upset at one of the kids for getting their bike too close to the stroller. So she kicked the bike.
Oof.
And the kid started cussing at this lady, and it was like top quality British, like unloading, it was beautiful. But for some reason that just like flipped a switch in my brain, and I went over there, I don't know why, and I started like cussing this kid out. I mean, just like my strongest American, like, you little just like going for it. And at first the kid was like terrified because an adult man is like yelling at him, right?
Yeah.
And then here's the best part. They all notice that like I don't have the same accent that they have, and also that I'm actually not going to do anything. And one of them stops and it's like, "Hey, where are you from?" And I was like, "Oh, it's over. This is done." Like, this is done. And I started to laugh at myself. Like, I started to realize like how stupid I probably sounded. And I started laughing. And of course, this mother is like watching me like, "What the fuck's this guy doing?" Like,
yeah.
And I started laughing. And then they unloaded the like their own like putrid language on me. It was wonderful. They were just started. I don't even know the British slang anymore. Like, the best part was like, they go, "Get out of here, you filthy tramp. Go back to your own country."
Good old nationalism.
That's the one and only time I've ever been called a tramp in my life. And like, I'm pretty proud of that one.
Yeah.
But that was the moment I was like, "Oh, I might have an anger problem. Like, this might be something wrong with me."
And did you figure out what was underneath that?
Oh, just facing my own failure. Like, I was my parents were married and divorced 13 times between the two of them, and I thought if I could get married and stay married, I would beat the system. Like, I would have like stopped the cycle, right?
Yeah.
And so I was obsessed with the idea of marrying the right person as in my teens and 20s, which is like, it's not the time you need to be obsessed with that kind of thing in your life, when you like don't know how to pay taxes, and you don't know like how to like sign a lease agreement for an apartment, like the most normal adult things that person should know how to do. And so I think I was fighting the deep shame of failure. And that.
But for a script that you may or may not have wanted.
Totally. Yeah. And it took me a long time to realize that was the wrong script. Like I was reading off the wrong thing. I mean, I went to school to be a pastor because it was the wrong script, and I could never, I got jobs that I just like, pastoral jobs, ministry jobs that I didn't show up for. Like, come on in. And I just like didn't go because it was the cognitive dissonance was too strong in my brain. It was like this magnetic like rejection almost in my brain. And that was,
but Ron, you're still like, and this isn't a dig, but like, you're still reading that script. You still believe that like marriage in your life is hugely important as far as like whether or not you're a failure, wouldn't you say?
that's a good question. Ask me that again. I don't quite understand.
Well, I think I heard Jason's question a little bit differently, and maybe I misinterpreted it, but like the script of marriage defines whether successful marriage defines whether or not you're success in life or a failure. And like, is that the script? Is that a script that you at the time were choosing? How are you still choosing that? And like maybe that's a good thing. Like, I think successful marriage is not the worst like bar, to judge yourself on, the ability to love.
My wife and I went through something really hard a couple of years ago that I had to decide. I had to like dig really deep and decide that I was reprogramming my brain to not believe that that's the success of our relationship was an indicator of the success of my life.
Yeah.
And I had
that's
to
the script that I'm talking about is what you just said. Yeah.
And I had to decide that whether we stayed together or not, whether I was going to have my second divorce or not, I was going to be okay. Like I had to decide that kind of without even knowing like what my next one step was, the next right step or the next 10 steps was.
Can you say the question that you asked again? Can you say it again? I kind of missed it.
What I just said?
The question that you and your wife asked.
I don't know if I even remember what I just said 10 seconds ago, but essentially like we were on the verge of, we were asking the question, and at certain points it was so heated. I was definitely like, hey, I'm about ready to go to the courthouse. And, but what I had to decide was like, I'm going to be okay no matter what, whether we make it or don't make it. And whether we're going to work on this or not going to work on it.
Yeah. Yeah. Nice.
Yeah, I know that's a lot about me, Jason. Are you in a relationship right now?
Are you looking to expand yours? Is that why you're asking?
Am I your type?
I like him a little furrier, but
nice spin, Jason. That was like an impressive. You just got jujitsu, Ron.
I did. I totally did. That was good. That was super good.
It is summer 2021, which I've heard many descriptors, and I am thankfully single for this moment.
Wait, what do you mean by that? Many descriptors for 2021?
I'll just say it's on and popping.
Nice.
Oh, I see.
I saw a sign in someone's window today going through the neighborhood that said vaxxed, waxed, and ready to relax.
I like just vaxxed and ready to relax. We'll keep all that hair. Bring the bears on.
Good to know. Good to know. I'll keep an eye out for him for you.
I have noticed in the dating world that people are like ready to go. That's what you mean, right? Things are opening back up and it is time. And yeah, it's like funny too, because it's summertime, that's happened, which is already you're right. It's kind of like the roaring 20s of sexuality out there.
Are we going to see like a giant increase, like uptick in like venereal diseases, babies, like,
yes and yes.
Diet mistakes.
Yes and yes.
Yeah. I don't know, but people are so careful around like maybe the pandemic and that awareness of your body and how fluids are shared with other people like crush the venereal disease issues out there.
Hope so.
I'm just a hopeful single guy.
That's fantastic. Well, they got us off the chart of resilience. What got you interested in resilience? Like, why did you even become interested in the first place? Was it your time working at the Gap?
No. Outside of surviving corporate America.
Did you start that? Did you start on the corporate side with that company, or did you start like everybody does normally and start on the retail side?
Oh no, I started on the corporate side.
You started corporate side.
I mean, how I got that job was bizarre. Like it's 2009. I've just finished my MFA. My art career's starting to take off, but I can't pay my bills because, art careers don't always produce good, income. And I'm at the like end of my financial rope, and I'm applying for just like random Craigslist jobs at this point. Just
Oh my gosh.
like, I just need to make money.
Yeah.
And I apply to a job that does not announce what company it is, and it's just an asset coordinator, which is essentially like an archivist for a creative team. And I show up for the interview, and and I Googled like, what is Too Folsom? Like, where's this location? And it's on Google Maps that it's Gap Corporate. And I was like, oh, okay.
Is this in San Francisco?
This is in San Francisco.
Yeah.
And basically the hiring manager was trying to get around HR because they didn't like the candidates that HR was sending them. And so they posted a Craigslist ad and then put me forward, and I got the job. And then 9 months later, that job did what it needed to do, like in the asset coordinator. It paid the bills barely, and student loans. But I remember I would have to walk to work and play Katy Perry's, what was the name of that song? No, earlier.
Oh,
earlier, Firework or something like that.
Okay.
Definitely not I Kissed a Girl. And
shows you all the Katy Perry songs I know.
There we go. Like Firework, just to like pump myself up. Like, okay, I guess I'm gonna go and do this again. Like, I guess I'm gonna make like this, like whatever. And then 9 months into the job, my sister died very suddenly, and the Dan Savage and his husband Terry, I think is his name, launched the It Gets Better project. And I was at the funeral, saw their contribution to the It Gets Better project, saw the media's sudden attention. Oh my God, there's a rash of LGBTQ suicides, and it's like, no, we've been killing ourselves for a long time. You guys are just paying attention. And came back. And I had a weekly meeting with the VP of my department. And, there's a lot of gay people that work at Gap, both in the retail and in the corporate side. And he was gay, I'm gay. And I was like, we're not going to talk financials this week, because that was like another component of my job.
Yeah.
I was like, I need to show you this. And so I showed it to him.
What'd you show him?
I showed him, I think it was Google's contribution. Because at that point, Google was only a corporation that had made a corporate contribution.
Yeah.
And he's in tears. And I said, just imagine this. Imagine there's a kid in the Midwest who sees Gap's video, walks into their Gap store and makes a friend and decides not to commit suicide because they don't feel so alone. I was like, this isn't about selling clothes. This is about saving lives. And that's all it took. He just turned around. He picked up a red phone, which is a direct line to the president of the company.
Wow.
And on Monday, I was in production on what became Gap Inc.'s contribution to the It Gets Better project. And I mean, I lied the entire time. I was like, oh, I've made videos, like I've got this. I had never shot a live action, piece in my life. My sister was the filmmaker in the family. I had always left that, that space of the visual world to her, because that was hers. I was in the still photo space. And I had cut videos of other people's footage, like appropriated, works, and I'd shot in my exhibitions. But this was the first thing that I had made and basically directed. And it was like the torch passed, in her death in some ways. And I've been making suicide prevention things every so often for a while since then. It's really important to me. Not so much shaming somebody to not commit suicide, because that's ultimately an individual's decision. I've had people in my life who have decided to end their lives
Mm-hmm.
because they're in massive amounts of pain. I've had people in my life who were watching their body deteriorate, and they were at the, you know, quote unquote an acceptable age, and it was an assisted suicide situation. So it's not about that. It's just knowing that, you know, if the question that you are currently asking that is sending you towards that space, if that can be solved, there are people here to help. And just take the breath, right? And the individual that I know who did assisted suicide, it was a long conversation. You know, it wasn't a split-second decision. And I don't want to say that other individuals it's a split-second decision, but just getting that little bit of breath in there to go, you know, what does this look like? Because I'm a suicide survivor on, you know, multiple sides, and that is probably the most intense thing that I struggle with over and over again, is could I have done more, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Were you about to say, Daniel?
Oh, I was just clarifying, but I mean, I hesitate to ask this question, but I guess it's probably fine if you don't want to answer. But have you ever? What's your relationship with, like? Have you ever had suicidal thoughts, or has that ever been something that you've thought about for whatever reason?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I got, you know, thankfully I had the tools to get help. And be like, yo, this is not right. I need to talk to somebody.
Yeah, a friend of mine reached out recently and was saying that they were having a really hard time, and it was getting to that point where at least thoughts were coming in, but they were also like, I don't want people to see me like this. And I was really saddened by that, because in my own experience with suicidal thoughts and actions, like the thing that got me through it was like blitzkrieg, get help, you know, and it was really important to shine light on that to my family, to my partner at the time, and to a therapist, people who actually knew what they were doing on a clinical, pathological, professional level, and then friends, you know. And I was never accused, at least I know of being selfish or you know, taking their time or energy in a way. Like, everyone was really there to help, and it got through it, you know.
Well, thanks for sharing that, Daniel. Man,
glad you're here, Daniel.
Yeah.
Glad I'm here.
Yeah, I'm too. That's
and the best, just I guess side note, sorry, Ron.
No.
The best parts of my life have been after that time, like tenfold. You know,
Can
and
you
I'm
tell
not.
me why?
Well, I want to be really careful about talking about this, because people get to a place where they want to check out of this world for a lot of different reasons, and I am not speaking to all of those reasons.
Yep.
It's a good disclaimer.
The reasons that drove me there were emotional. And
can I be clear? I'm asking about I'm curious as to why the best parts of your life have been post.
Yeah, that's I
okay,
hear that.
okay.
I'm answering that question. And so because they were emotional problems, not because of, but I recognized they were emotional problems, got that help, started unpeeling the layers underneath what the emotions were that were driving me to not want to be here. And the answers that I found led to like 70% of the greatest experiences of my life, and connections with people, and new levels and awareness and ability to feel my emotions, the emotions under what was expressing itself as anxiety, extreme anxiety, which I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. And anyone out there who's experiencing any level of anxiety, it can be really confusing and very uncomfortable. And but for me, there was emotional answers underneath that, and for me it was suppressed grief. You know, grief just ended up, if I felt it, which was a hell of an adventure just to get to it, I'm not minimizing that. Oh yeah, it was suppressed grief, so I just like decided to feel grief one day and the anxiety went away. But I did eventually get there, and when I did, that anxiety just melted into grief, and there was knowledge there that set me on a path where I was really able to grow up and feel safe in the world now, you know, in general. And if I don't feel safe now, it's information. Anxiety is now information instead of just like, an attack or what feels like an attack. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense, and it reminds me of our earlier conversation about dealing with kind of anger and how one is with their response, and it's that information, right? So how many triggers and also responses or how many triggers are we responding to that we don't actually know what's underneath that trigger in the first place, and so there's like an outsized reaction. And it's really it's something that has metastasized, that has not been investigated or dealt with for a variety of reasons, right? Like there's shame, there's grief, and I don't mean to just start pulling out kind of buckets, but I'm saying, like, when someone touches a soft spot for me, one of the things that I've learned to do is, like, I'm going to have the initial response, and then I'm going to go, why is that such a soft spot? Why does that bother me? Why is financial insecurity such a debilitating thing for me, in a variety of ways? Well, because it was normally attached with X, and X in terms of some of my closest relationships growing up, right? Finances were attached with love and in certain relationships. And so it impacts on all these other ways. And all it really is like, let me get to a better sense of self-awareness so that I can have a better response, not so that I can be in control, but so that I can flow with what's in front of me and what's happening. Because I'm never going to be able to control somebody else's, what they say. But what I can do is be in a better relationship with how I respond.
Yeah, that's straight up Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. Have you read that book?
It has been a cool decade, but it sounds like I need to go and reinvestigate, because
it sounds like you don't, because you just basically said that you lived the thesis of it in my experience.
That's why you're on here talking to us. We're desperately looking for answers.
Well, that
sounds like you guys have figured out a few.
That one that you just spoke to, that we have a choice, and right, we don't always feel like we do, right? But I think that the maybe a better way to say it is, I'm just hacking this stuff out, I really am, but I have experienced a couple successes with it, is that we have the potential to choose, how we respond to stuff. And you got to let go of, you have to learn, you have to let go of with a choice you are making. Some of those choices are not conscious. So like, your mind is making a choice subconsciously. How the fuck do I make a different choice when it's already made for it? It's like, what, right? But the potential, I believe, is there for us to slowly start, and in some cases quickly, make ground on making choices about how we respond to the adversities of life.
Yeah, I mean, I had a really wise friend one day say to me, I'd had a really intense experience happen, and I wanted to let go of it. I wanted it to just kind of go away and get rid of it. And because I kept hearing that language in the self-help space, like, you got to let go of this, right? And this really good friend turned it on a dime for me and was like, Jason, it's never gonna be gone. This is with you for the rest of your life. The question is your relationship to it, and whether or not it's going to control how you move through, or whether or not, control you on how you move through with this, or whether or not you're going to kind of, as my the subject of the protagonist of my feature says, it's like a pearl, right? There's that sand that's the grit, right? And that's causing the problem for what is it, an oyster? Or
an oyster.
Yeah. I forget. So it's it's causing that grit, and in order to protect the body, the pearl is created around that little bit of grit, so that it's, and it makes something really beautiful. And in many ways, that's what I hope I'm doing as a filmmaker, as I kind of, shepherd and repackage the stories of individuals' lives who have gone through that, or package them.
That's interesting. That term pearls of wisdom, like total cliche, right? But I never, because Ross Pino, one of our last guests, he's an artist in Brooklyn, really, really cool guy. And he mentioned that same exact thing that you just said. There being irritation and maybe much more than irritation, like utter
Yeah.
destruction at the center. You know, I did just want to say too, like I can't put too fine of a point, in my opinion, on it's easy to say that we have a choice to respond to different things. And that is, I know that's not the case. Sometimes it is, you know, but when you're getting bullied by, when a person's getting what I term getting bullied by my emotions, you know, overwhelmed by them, controlled by them, just affected in a way where I don't have a choice, that's a tough place to be. And I mean, that's one of the mysteries of the world, how to get through that. And because it's probably different for each person, you know, but I think that journey to do that is one of the most valued and valid things that a person can go through. You know, because it even relates to our discussion about anger. I last night, I kind of feel like I lost my like 1 month, you know, chip in losing my cool with someone. And I really disappointed in myself, but you know, I lost the chip, kind of had a little relapse, and I wasn't able to make a choice, you know. And so, all right, let's rep it out again. Let's reset that, you know, back to the beginning.
Yeah. Man, that's interesting.
But I'll just say, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I mean, I'll just say, to follow up on this kind of choice thing, I mean, it's exciting that we're in a moment where we're both discovering things that cultures have known for a long time, which is the use of psychedelics as one, you know, as one area to kind of help reset the neural pathways of the brain. We also have found modalities like EMDR. I mean, so, you know, there are plant-based and also talk therapy-based, so, you know, programs which can help you so that can be regulated in some way. And I mean, go ahead.
What's your experience with psychedelics?
They are powerful.
But I mean, it's interesting you bring it up. Have you had some kind of cathartic experience with psychedelics?
I have.
Yeah.
I mean, I haven't used them in a. I'm fascinated by and would love to try. Oh God, I forgot what
microdosing.
No, I've done that.
Okay.
Ayahuasca, I almost did about a year ago, or 2 years ago. And that was I walked back. I was too close to an incident that had happened in my life. And I was like, I'm not ready to be with this quite yet.
Good job, man.
Yeah. But I'm really interested in what Michael Pollan kind of, the history that he put together mostly for Western.
How to Change Your Mind? Is that what his book is?
How to Change Your Mind?
Yeah, the book's right back over here on my shelf.
Yeah, and I would love to work with a therapist that's trained in that, that modality basically, because I think it would be really powerful.
Arnold's leading a mushroom psychedelic retreat, right, in September.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Whoa! Hi.
You're welcome to come. I don't tell too many people that, but I guess it's out in the bag. But
well, you mentioned it in our last podcast.
Did I? That's funny.
Yeah, man.
I say things that I like don't remember saying, but really, what we're doing, Jason, we're not providing like a mental health care professional to talk you through something. Although there will be one there to hold space. Okay. But we're just providing the space. We've rented this amazing space in the kind of the wilderness that's, I think, really going to, between the kind of the vibe everyone is bringing together and our intention of healing. Like, the intention is not recreation. That is not the intention. The intention is to dive safely together into the stuff that needs to be untied in our minds and our hearts. And so I will be, and so will this other person who's the mental health care professional. We'll just be holding space for the men who will be walking through this. If you want to,
wait, is it all men?
It's all men. It's all men.
Wow.
Yeah.
Maybe, I don't know. We'll see. I'm fascinated that you're doing this, and I would love to hear about it afterwards.
Well, Jason, I'm curious. Is that something that puts you off of wanting to do something like that? That it would be all men?
No. It fascinates me even more. I mean, there's a film called The Work. Have you seen this?
Yeah,
Dude,
recently.
I'm so glad you brought this up. We've got a writing partner who's like a black
did
belt
it.
in that world. Yeah, he did it.
Well, he worked with those same people from the movie. He did the thing.
Well, I mean, that film
Yeah.
is incredible. That yeah. So that the work and what you're doing, very
Yeah.
different but similar in a certain way.
Maybe they could combine the work idea with the with the psychedelic idea.
I mean, Richard's probably I could see Richard doing that in the future. That's a guy you need to talk to as well, Jason. Richard's had an extraordinary life, and we're working with I'm sorry. Daniel and I are working with him as peers on. We're all working on our own stories, and he has a very, very interesting story that I'll tell you. I mean, you can go listen. We actually interviewed him on one of the podcasts. I'll let you listen to it. But basically, he was the son of a drug dealer and really fought a lot of stuff growing up and a lot of trauma. And he was stuck in pain one night, like insane pain. His relationship with pain because of his athletic career is unimaginable. But he was trying to get his mind off the pain and found that movie, changed his life. Wow. And sought those guys out, flew to San Francisco to work with them. Wow. And has continued to do that work on the East Coast. And he's like really, really involved. And I've worked with a lot of like men's coaches and been in that world for a long time. And that guy is one of the most naturally gifted dudes I've ever met in my life in that space. Like he is not only empathetic, I'm sorry, but he's an actual leader. He's a very, very good leader.
Yeah. And he is Richard Hubbard is his name, and we did a episode with him. I think that I've done his Wednesday men's group, which is free and really valuable, and several times. And I think that he's one of the people who has the most complete masculine, feminine spectrum, everything in between package in the way he speaks, in the way that he leads, in the way that he does his work.
Yeah.
It's really been an honor and a pleasure to work with him and writing in men's group, sessions, and just as a friend. He called me, anyways, I love Richard Hubbard. Shout out to that person.
Yeah. He's the real deal. He's awesome. I mean, I was asking about psychedelics because it's been a part of my life for the last couple of years. And I've mentioned it on here before, but I used to have a really bad relationship with an inner voice that just told me what a piece of shit I was for my whole life. And it was the kind of inner voice that would wake me up in the middle of the night to remind me what a piece of shit I was. And then I would become super adrenalized and would not be able to sleep the rest of the night. And which was probably a big reason why I drank so much in my past. And
I would think so.
So that's quite the saboteur.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was through microdosing, which was my first experience with psychedelics, which was not a psychedelic experience at all. Like I'd never felt anything, experienced anything that I could attribute to that in particular, except for the well, there's no exception that I didn't have a psychedelic experience. I will say the outcome was laying in bed one night, that voice coming for a visit to tell me how terrible I was. And then the question for the first time in my life, which felt like the biggest relief, which was, is this thought serving me? That was literally what my brain came up with. And the proposal of that question in my mind was like the biggest gift I'd ever had. And like, holy shit, I got some breathing room for this. And just asking that question felt completely like I was I got the value of that microdosing experience, because I was able to say, no, it's not helpful. I don't have to wrestle with this anymore. And instead of like trying to not think about it, or instead of trying to come up with another thought to overwhelm it, it was like, no, it's not helpful. And it was almost like my brain was like, okay, what else are we going to think about now? And I was able to like roll over and like go to sleep without the anxiety that I used to carry and all those kinds of things.
You know,
I have a
Jason,
go ahead.
sorry, please.
A similar but different experience. I have a horrific fear of heights. I mean, it's one of them. I have like a few recurring dreams. One of them is that my death will occur from a fall off the side of a mountain. The second is being in Elton John's shoe closet. May that happen one day in real life. I have nothing, no real interest in shoes, but apparently I just really want to be in his shoe closet with him.
Dude, that's amazing.
But back to the fear of heights, because that's the
So wait a second, just so I'm clear, that's a reoccurring dream you have?
From like childhood. Yeah. I'm like kind of obsessed with Elton John.
So good.
You know, his shoe closet is like the size of a house.
Oh, exactly. There's multiple shoe closets. I'm like,
there's a bathroom in his shoe closet. Let's put it out.
Good, because I'm gonna need time in there.
That's so
good. So I do this as a way to like kind of reset. Because we don't really have seasons so much in San Francisco. It's kind of just all the same.
Yeah.
Is that I will walk from my house in the Tender Knob neighborhood, which is this like bleed neighborhood between the Tenderloin and Nob Hill. I'll walk from my house across the Golden Gate over to Sausalito and then take the ferry back into San Francisco. And it's a way for me to kind of like leave everything in San Francisco, cross the bridge. But I have this horrific fear of heights. So getting across the Golden Gate Bridge can be a very intense experience. And one day I decided that I was going to do this and do some LSD. And I got to the middle of the bridge and I found myself literally not, let me be clear, there's no scary part to this story. I'm leaning on the edge of the bridge, like on the railing, and I'm just getting to enjoy the sailboats that are on the sea or on the, in the bay. And I'm realizing, oh my God, I'm not scared. Like there's no anxiety. It had all just disappeared that was normally there.
Yeah.
And it actually really helped my meditation practice because I finally could figure out what they were talking about, where you just were in with, the cars as Headspace loves to do. You're just watching the cars pass by. And it was in some way where you're like, well, is this serving me? Yeah. I was like, oh, I'm not inherently afraid of heights. This is just some kind of anxiety response. Yeah. And this is what it feels like to not be in that anxiety response. And so I actually have a choice now when I walk across the bridge, whether or not I'm going to engage with that response, which I never had that choice previously.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And it was like very powerful rewiring of my brain.
Yeah. Yeah. See, and again, that seems like it's the ability, the experience of achieving by whatever means, in this case psychedelic choice choice regarding something you didn't have a choice about before.
Right.
I was going to say earlier, I saw Ronald's experience with that voice that he did not have much agency over or communication with, and I feel like I saw in his life real time connection with that, and him making a choice to not do that, to not engage with that voice or feed that voice or become the part that creates that voice and just say different things. And a lot of people, I think we all maybe at times say, I experienced this thing and it was so enlightening, and then it's like it was really just kind of a small real change, which is okay and good. Change happens slow, but I've been curious about what affects subconscious access to your subconscious and subconscious change in your inner world. And it seems like for me, trauma will change that within us for good or bad.
Yeah.
And so will repetition, like daily repetition, but also, psychedelics, hypnosis I've heard can, but I don't know much about that world and I haven't had any success or experience in it. I'm in success with my small experience, but psychedelics seem to be the way to, if you are ready to make wholesale changes or significant inner changes, that seems like a doorway. It's just it's one you have to be so careful. Like for me, it is not a doorway that is open. Like I just can't. It led to huge trauma in my life and it wasn't right. I've heard other stories about people having ayahuasca experiences and then throwing themselves in front of a train. If you have childhood trauma, as I understand it, be super careful, take incremental steps. I don't know, but it seems like that's a doorway that is, and I'm really glad that we're all sharing about it, and that the world is discovering it, right? It's beautiful.
Well, parts of the world have always known about it.
Yeah.
I'm glad that
Western
it's
world. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Decriminalized and in places so that we can get back to researching it and understanding
100%
how it works.
Jay, I'm glad you brought up the negative side of that too, because I think it's easy to like say something is like purely good and right for everybody, and I think it's right to mention like actually it's not, and there are risks involved. And Jason, you were mentioning like right before.
Actually, Ron, can I say one more thing about that? It's not a whole nother topic. Quick note. I feel like it's important to know too. I've learned recently and experienced myself that edible marijuana is metabolized in our brains similar to a psychedelic, and that's another thing people should be very careful, in my opinion, with, and also use as with that intention if they do feel safe. I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, I was gonna say, Jason, or bring up the fact you mentioned your feature length film. Did I use the right phrase? Feature length film?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And I think you were saying that the kind of the precipitating moment for the protagonist in that was also from a drug experience, right? A negative drug experience.
Yeah, I mean that's a prescription drug. So the inciting event in that film, it's also the inciting event in the short that this film is based off of.
What's the name of that again?
Yeah, the short is called "How to Make a Pearl," and you can see it. You can see it on the Guardian's website. The best place to watch it is on Vimeo's, the Guardian's Vimeo channel, only because the film happens in almost complete darkness, and that's part of the film. And Vimeo just deals with quality differently than YouTube does.
Yeah.
But nonetheless,
we'll make sure to have the link for that in the show notes. So that's great.
Cool. Okay. I mean, he's given the setup is it's a guy who this is a true story. It's a guy who in 2007 becomes allergic to artificial, and I say allergic because we don't have any other language for this to understand what's going on, but becomes allergic to artificial and natural light, and has lived in almost complete darkness since 2007. And I say almost complete because he lives by the light of a one battery LED flashlight that he turns on and off as he's navigating his space, because if it's too much light, he burns, and describes it almost like having a sunburn, but on the inside of his skin.
So even like candlelight does that to him?
Every single type of light. So like, at his worst, he had even the lights that are on the microwave that illuminate the time.
Yeah.
He had to cover that with a black flap so because that was enough light to burn him if that was, not covered.
Wow.
So
is the LED light different or something? Because that's a heck of a lot brighter than a microwave time light.
No, it's not. He just has control of when it's turning on and off. And I mean, he cut himself enough times trying to make dinner that he had to, he was like, well, I got to have this on for a certain amount of time so that I can chop vegetables and things like that. But to your point, or to your question, he was given, I'll let the
perfect city, San Francisco city sound.
He was given the pill form of lidocaine,
and that's a narcotic, right? That's like an actual, it's like in the family of like opium or something like that.
I actually don't know what family
I don't know either.
It's part of.
Yeah. Okay.
But he's given that drug, and he says, and we don't know how memories are stored. Like, we just don't know that information fully enough yet.
Yeah.
He says that he took the drug and it unleashed a series of traumatic memories that he had not thought about in a very long time, and he got caught in a series of what would be called basically PTSD episodes, and he walked to the edge of suicide with those because he couldn't get help. He's a vet, and the VA was not sending anybody out to his house. And one of the more curious things that he has said that has brought to my attention how we control our own thoughts and our own chemical experiences, basically, of the world, is he's like, I don't really have the ability to change the channel because I'm just sitting in darkness. When if you're having a bad day, I think this is one of the things that got so complicated with the pandemic. You go outside,
right?
You change the channel of your environment, and he was stuck in that. And so the film explores, it goes through a bunch of different sort of questions that are not specifically related to surviving in the darkness, but it uses darkness as this metaphor, and explores John Capellas, that's the gentleman's name. It explores his life through this lens. And I'm really interested in individuals who have experienced something that is almost at the level of myth. A guy that has been forced to live in the dark for the last, almost 14 years. I made a film, you referenced it at the start of the podcast, A Childhood on Fire. Nick was set on fire by his stepfather when he was a child. I've made in my earlier life as a visual artist, I made a lot of work with veterans who have returned from war and are trying to integrate that. And, sadly, we've normalized the experience of we've normalized that we are constantly in a war, right? I don't remember much of my life where we don't have soldiers deployed in some kind of conflict. Right. This just seems like it's going to go on forever and all over the place. But that is not, I don't want to speak as a historian because that's not my space, but like what those individuals are experiencing is not necessarily what we should be doing all the time. Like they've experienced something that's at the level of, in my mind, myth. And I want to be clear, like that's the trauma, but then the post-traumatic growth and the resilience that's created to survive that, right? Some people walk up to suicide and they go, I don't want to do this anymore, and they exit. And that's their choice, right? It leaves a wake of a lot of intense feelings for those that are left behind, but ultimately that's their body, and that's their choice as to whether or not they can handle this any further. I'm interested in those who don't make that choice, who don't choose to exit, and they have gone into their hells, whatever that may be, and they've mined a lot of pearls since we've already used that in the course of this conversation. And I think that they bring back a lot of information for those of us that have not been asked or tasked with walking through that hell, and ways in which we can think about our lives differently, and with Nick just continues to be a beacon, in my opinion, of how to raise children, both as a father, but now specifically as Magnus, Nick's oldest child, has announced that their pronouns are they, them, and has chosen to prefers to wear dresses and other types of things that we have coded as feminine. And I'm just watching Nick produce an experience, Nick and the family around Magnus, I want to be clear, because it's not just Nick, produce a loving environment where Magnus gets to figure out who Magnus is on Magnus's terms. And as a kid that grew up queer, where I found out later that my father was gay, and my father didn't do that. He watched me walk into becoming an evangelical Christian and try to basically put myself through conversion therapy. And that level of betrayal and regret, betrayal specifically, that I felt, where he was protecting himself in so many ways. Like he has to live with that decision, and I have to live with that decision, and I have to undo all of that work, that was done there. And Nick in A Childhood on Fire, the experiences that Nick is having that are traumatic, are set off by these beautiful scenes in which Nick is reading these lunch notes to his children, Magnus and Odin.
Yeah.
And he's so smart. He's trying to get in to his child's psyche before the external narratives of their self-worth has gets in and tells them what they're worth. And he's trying to get in there and not necessarily produce a counter narrative, just produce a narrative that is based in a foundation of love and support and worth, right? And he just posted on Instagram like 2 days ago, latest lunch note.
I just saw it too.
To Magnus. And I mean, I'm sitting there going, if I would have received this as a gay kid, I would have saved so much time.
And what a unique way to do it too, because that letter can be kept and then referenced again. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
It doesn't change or get warped by your mind for better or for worse. It's just concrete there, totem, always. That was one of the more touching things that I've heard someone talk about, in this year, that he does that for his kids, takes the time. It's special.
I've got the post pulled up. What do you guys think? Journalist and filmmakers, is it ethical to read this?
It's public.
Perfect.
I mean, he doesn't have I don't. No, he doesn't have a private account. He has a public account.
Yeah, it's public. Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna read it because I'm glad we all three saw it. Yeah. It says, Magnus, I love watching you discover who you are and the confidence you show in how you present yourself. Okay, I'm gonna try to make it through this. I'm here to cheer you on, learn from you, and be your biggest fan. Some of who you are, how you see yourself, and the ways you want others to see you will change over your life, and that's okay. I will always respect you. You are normal to me. You are special, and you belong. Love, Dad.
And what I love so much about because you rereading it brought it to my mind, is that Nick is not to like analyze this too much, but I'm going to learn from you. He drops the hierarchy of the father-child relationship, parent-child. It's like you also are leading, and that is a level of empowerment.
Yeah.
As that's real special.
Yeah, it's extremely special.
It's easy to say that we can learn from children, but when I see parents and people in general relating with children, and they put those children in leadership positions with their words, saying that I just learned this thing from you, or in some way exactly what you just said. It's like humbling, it's humble, it's empowering. It makes both people feel more, in my eyes, both of those people seem like strong leaders. When a person is willing to, who's in a leadership role like a parent, is willing to prop their child, put their child up, to put themselves below and just say thank you for being you and teaching this lesson in some sort of appropriate way. It's just like I respect everyone in that situation so much.
And also, as a good girlfriend reminded me a weekend ago, we are all making all of this up all of the time. All of the time.
Yeah.
There is no, that's why I was like, oh, you figured out that script wasn't working for you, right? Because it's a script. It's not, there's no instruction manual. There's none of that, right? And I'm gonna learn from you is like, oh wait, Dad doesn't have it all figured out.
Yeah.
Oh, then I guess I don't have to have it all figured out either. I get to live in I get to live in the space between.
Yeah.
Whatever that means, as I figure out what's the right thing for me. And that can also change.
Yeah.
And it's also not mutually exclusive from very strong leadership in the kind of, you might say, the opposite way, right? Like,
right.
Yeah.
Mm. The one other thing that you said, Jason, before we started recording this was how a lot of your subjects also are in the journey of refathering them or fathering themselves, parenting
Yeah.
themselves. Yeah. And I know we've talked about that a bit on our last conversation. What's your perspective like for yourself as you are reparenting yourself, especially sounds like around that wound with your dad's, his own journey coming out? Like what do you see in your subjects, and how is that playing out in your life?
I mean, I'm asking similar. I'm asking. I want to say that I'm asking similar but different questions, right? So, A Childhood on Fire came to be because I was with Nick and we didn't know each other super well, but I just got this sense, I felt this kind of heat to ask him this question because I had seen him with his children, and how he parented, and was just in such awe. Because it was a different script than I had seen.
Yeah.
And I said, look, this is what's going on with my dad, and I am really struggling with what my what I think his responsibility is to me and what my responsibility is to him as a child. And that's the question of the film. What's the responsibility of a parent to a child? And it gets asked reflexively, both as a son for Nick to his biological parents and step parents, and also to his children. And so that's what I'm asking in my film. Each film has a different kind of central question.
Yeah.
And how in my film for the BBC, which is about gay conversion therapy in the Middle Eastern North Africa region of the world, it's a question of how do you survive in a culture which is, in some ways, doesn't even acknowledge that you exist.
Right.
And in other ways, in the family unit that's saying, you have to get rid of this. And the film presents this balanced perspective with both the conversion therapist saying, you get where all that rhetoric is coming from.
Yeah.
And then you get the first person experience of a gay man and a lesbian, and it's about basically chosen families. That's how you kind of find your way. You realize that this whole, I'm going to go out on a limb and say this, but this whole idea that has served us for so long, which is your biological family is the self-sustain, is the unit that sustains you. Yeah. Well, we live in a different time and place, and we may not need that story any longer.
Yeah.
If the biological parent or the family, and my people, queers have really, we were thrown out of our houses and told, you deserve to die and all these types of things. And we went and built chosen families and remade what that looked like. And I think my heterosexual counterparts are also learning, this is who we're doing life with.
Yeah.
Not to say that the biological family unit is horrible. I mean, a lot of people have really lovely relationships with their with their family, but I'm saying that we have a choice. And I think that's a powerful, I don't know if that answered your question. I kind of got off on a little bit of a tangent there.
No, it's good. It's great. I mean, you answered it in your own way, and that's beautiful.
That subject of chosen families and biological families has been on my mind a little bit lately, in the exact way you just said. And it's interesting the way that you kind of own that you have a chosen family and that you use that phrase so consistently. Because I think too, it's maybe one's relationship with their biological family. It doesn't have to also be and not to say you're putting it in these terms, but it would be easy, I think, to take what you're saying and put it in the terms of I am either totally into and connected with my biological family, or I am choosing another family, and adjusting our relationships with our family, and how much time we spend with them. you know, maybe you just take the edge off of how much time you spend with your family and you don't feel quite so obligated to spend every holiday with them, you know. I think that there's a lot of room there to relieve some tension and choose our other families also. Does that make sense?
I mean, that's even larger than the chosen family or biological family conversation. You know, it's like, um, I don't feel the need to get married. I don't feel the need to have kids. I know so many of my counterparts who are feeling this sense of expectation and pressure to do that because they may have a script of that's what success looks like.
Oh,
And
interesting. Right.
you know, I mean, I sat back last summer and was talking with my therapist and was like, whoa, everything that I set out for that I identified as success, I've achieved.
Hmm.
Okay, great. I get to make a whole new life now. Like, what's the next set of, and not to put it in this capitalistic productive space, but what does a good life look like?
Yeah.
And now what does that mean as I, you know, as I'm about to enter the 40 to 60, you know, spread? What is that? What did I gain from 20 to 40? What insights did I gain, and how has that produced a foundation that I can make different decisions from 40 to 60? You know, I could go back into a corporate job and make a 6-figure salary because I gratefully got the, you know, you have to understand that that's a lot of money where I come from. So like that was a big deal for me to make that much money. But I walked away from it because I was like, this is not the life that I'm looking for.
Yeah.
This is not how I want to organize my time.
Yeah.
And that's a choice. And when I, you know, when sometimes it gets rough there, I come back to, even in my anxiety, that like I'm still captaining this ship the way that I want to captain this ship. And that gets me up in the morning. That I still have that level of agency. And I think and I recognize that is a privilege.
Yeah, big time.
In many ways.
Yeah.
But it's also a choice that I've made.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
That word agency, I'm so glad you used that, because that's the word I was thinking of as you're describing your ability to dictate or choose what you want in your life. And I lived in a lot of fear for years, most of my adult life, like trying to find the safe place of a career, of relationship, and all those things. And it's maybe around that time that I had that psychedelic experience. I don't know if it's causal or correlate, you know, those things, but around that time I thought I have to have agency, and it's got to be about the investments that bring back the fullest riches and joy for my own heart and my own experience, and not what I'm not trying to prep for disaster. Right. I'm not trying to pursue safety. And you're right. It is a crazy privilege. Like, there is a lot of elements that have to be into place to even begin to ask those questions.
Right. Right.
And the fact that I'm a white dude who is straight and have opportunity and a family who loves me and a wife we're business partners together. I get it. Like, that's not common. And so I'm very, 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 very grateful for that experience. I don't know if that came out right. I don't know if I should say like, I'm glad I was born a white straight guy. Like, that's not what I'm trying to say. Holy shit. Like, I get to choose something, and it's not common. It's not common to be able to choose.
Right. And I mean, this is the turn that's kind of interesting to me now that this has been brought up. Like, while I have this complex relationship with my father because of this sense of betrayal from my teenage years around the gay stuff.
Yeah.
My father is the one who, you know, because he came from no financial privilege at all. I mean, it was like really intense, his financial background. And he was the one that instilled that sense of like, make the life that you need to make, Jason. And now it's colored in a way because he was struggling with that question for himself,
right,
in so many ways. But I look at this gift and this privilege and the ability to just hold on to that agency of like, I may struggle to make my rent next month, but I'm making the things and I'm doing the work that I feel like I need to do in the world. And that is around bringing these stories of resilience and post-traumatic growth into the world. And that is, can be so super intense psychologically sometimes.
Yeah.
But it feels like what I was put here to do.
Yeah.
And I'm going to do that, as opposed to go and I'm going to do that with all the money, financial complications, rather than go and do this other job where I am wrung out, basically.
Right.
You know, and that's that. Yes, that's a huge privilege, and it's also how do I want to say this? I don't want to put aside the privilege of it, but I also want to honor the agency of the other of other. I mean, this is a long story of creatives who have made this decision over and over again, and you know, and they bring about a lot of medicine and growth and those types of things to the world, because they bring a different perspective into the world.
Sounds like both once you decide that that's the position you want to be in as a creative, like you kind of owe it to that lineage to be responsible with your powers. Am I off, or does that seem kind of in line with what you're trying to say?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't want to. I hesitate to. I'm not gonna say yes. Yeah.
It's okay to say no.
Well, no.
Yeah,
I don't want to. There's this great T-shirt that I saw that just, and I'm afraid to say the slogan because I don't want to co-opt the language, because I understand where the language is coming from, which is like, I'm my ancestors' like greatest dream. And I think about, like, I'm living the life that my father, who made all of those choices, he did work that job that he didn't, you know, and so did my mom, you know, to create this, you know, life, which, you know, I still had massive student loans and all these types of things. Like they, you know, they weren't able to help me that way, but they created that foundation so that I could then go and do this. And I'm gonna honor the hard work and sweat that they did so that I could make these choices.
That's beautiful.
And also where I can open it up so that, you know, I'm lifting other people up at the same time.
What it reminded me of was, and I've got to have to wrap it up here, but I've been a part of the non-drinking community for a while, and haven't had anything to drink in over 7 years. And one of the strong medicines that I got from being in the sober community is hearing perspective on people's stories, and which is often resilience, right? Like they got to their end and they finally were able to find the right resources, the right people came in their lives, and they were able to have a little bit of room to think of something else, to have a different perspective. And you've got to get to a very particular place in your life in order to open yourself up into that community, to hear those stories that then gives you the strength, right? And
or have some experience in your life that puts you in a position where you're like, what is the meaning of this, and is any of this worth it? Is this story that I've imbibed, you know, gonna sorry to interrupt.
No, what I was gonna say is many people will choose not to go to those places, whether they need that help or not. I think everyone needs to hear those stories of someone saying, I was in a spot that was so bad and something had to change in my life. And whether that something was a mental shift or a physical shift in their world, we all need to know it's possible. And I think what you are doing, telling your stories around this, is saying, number one, here are the people that folks aren't thinking about, and number two, it's a story of resilience. And I think that what you're doing is making stories accessible to a broader audience that wouldn't walk into a place and hear those normally very private stories.
And that is like the deep honor of my life, is that individuals are willing to sit and share that and give me such trust
Oh my
to
gosh.
shape that for such a large audience. I mean, it was How to Make a Pearl was my graduate thesis, and one of the most important things was that if I was going to sell it, I was going to sell it to a platform that was global and that was free. It was not a walled garden. It could get to as many people and be seen by as many people as possible. And that has actually proven to be quite useful, because last year, 3 years after the film debuted, it went around the circuit again, so to speak, because there were a whole bunch of people that were caught in their houses, couldn't do anything, and they were freaking out. And this, the one of the festivals put it back up as saying, like, here's how to handle isolation.
Whoa.
Look at what this individual did in this deep amount of isolation. And so it had another run of the medicine that John brings into the world, that I believe John brings into the world.
Yeah.
I mean, can I just say one thing about this that's different? I mean, there is nothing normal about someone you love being here one day and then disappearing the next, right? And that being from suicide or from a horrific accident, right? And it really just, it sat me and it positioned me in this place where it was like, well, if it can happen that quickly, then what are the choices that I'm making right now? And this is where this agency comes from, right? Do I want to be participating in, like, I was in the visual art world where most of my things were inaccessible from a cost perspective to most people. They couldn't buy them and put it in their homes, or it was going to be bought, by a museum, hopefully, and then trot it out every once in a while. Or do I want to work in this other space where I get to tell stories, have the privilege of telling stories to broad amounts of people, when it's this type of storytelling, right? It's about crazy traumatic things. And I was like, I got that choice, and every single day I'm gonna make that choice as to which world am I going to operate in. And sure, there's the chemical part that we talked about, but like that's the nugget, that's the foundation of that agency of, like, this could all just disappear tomorrow. Like, what am I doing right now? It's like so much. I finally read Eckhart Tolle's The Power of Now, and that's exactly like, I read that and I was like, yes, absolutely.
Jason, thank you so much for joining us, man. You're like, I know that I could keep going for another 2 hours and keep asking you tons of questions, and I might beg you to come back at some point.
I would love to come back.
Daniel, did you have something else?
No, I was just saying, if you haven't read The New Earth by Eckhart Tolle, highly recommend.
And he's got an accompanying podcast with Oprah that goes through chapter by chapter, which is, when I first heard, I was like, I am not going to listen to it because of that reason. But then I was like, once I got in, I was like, holy shit, this is actually really good. It's really, really good. So highly recommended, man. Jason, how can we go ahead?
Go ahead.
How can we find you, and what are you working on right now? What's about to come out, or what's like your biggest thing?
I can be found on all the social spaces. It's just at Jason Hanasik, Hanasik, Instagram, Facebook. The best place, honestly, even though it's pretty old school, is I do an email newsletter.
Awesome.
And that, I think, is I probably will be coming, backing away from some of the social spaces and devoting my time into that space more and more, because I like it. So that's the way you can reach me. I'm working on, I have a new short that's wild in its form. It's a dance film. It's the first time I've made a dance film, but it still deals with trauma and post-traumatic growth. That's been a real curious challenge. I'm directing that. That's in post-production. I'm working on my first feature, which is John Who Lives in the Dark, which is a expansion of How to Make a Pearl. And then I have another project which is tentatively called Postcards from Amman. And I shot all of this footage when I was in Amman, Jordan, for the BBC film. I couldn't use any of it because of something that went down with the BBC. And I'm thinking about repurposing it for more first-person the first person documentary that I would do.
Wow.
And I'm hoping to get that out by early 2022.
If any of it is half as good as Childhood on Fire, I know we're all in for a big treat, because that is a spectacular film. I'm looking forward to consuming the rest.
Yeah, and the animation on your film about the two, the gay and the lesbian person who are not being supported by their families, that animation, I didn't expect that. It's really beautiful and interesting.
Shout out to Leah Nichols, who is an exquisite animator who really helped me figure
cool.
that one out.
Yeah,
so
cool.
Really
thank
cool.
you for saying that.
Yeah. Thanks, Jason. I really appreciate you, man. I'm looking forward to this, and I a little disappointed to hear that wasn't your type, but
well, happy Pride.
Happy Pride, man. Man, thank you, dude. It's a real pleasure and gift to get to know you, and I hope we get to like keep talking directly and indirectly, and I'll reach out to you about the psychedelic retreat in September. So thank you, man. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it, everybody.
Thank you guys. Awesome.